Hi, this is Alana Smith, and I'm hanging out with some people who really like stars and stripes in a circular shape.
Greetings, Cap fans. Welcome to episode 94 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Verbanis, and I'm joined by the best gosh darn co-host. That would be Mr. Bob Lucius. Hey, Bob. For though they may be parted, there is still a chance that they will see. There will be an answer. Let it be.
You almost had me for a second, Rick. Almost. I was like, what the heck is Rick talking about? You know, we were talking before the show that you're doing this fasting and you're in ketosis. You're a little bit fatigued. Maybe your cognitive capabilities have slipped. And I'm like, he's gone off the deep end, folks. He's doing poetry slam. It's not a poetry slam podcast.
That's true. It is true. But that song, Let It Be, I thought that was an appropriate part of the song. For though they may be parted, there's still a chance that they will see. So I'm thinking of the story we're covering today, which is Captain America 125, which takes place in Vietnam. And there is a doctor who has been kidnapped, and both sides of the war, the north side, the south side of Vietnam, feel it was the other side that did this. Mm-hmm. And they're parted, right?
Right.
But there will come an answer, Bob, and they will see.
Mm-hmm.
Let it be.
Just let it be.
Yeah.
Right.
The other thing too, Bob, is do you know when the album Let It Be was released?
I can only guess 1970.
Not only 1970, Bob, but the album was released in May of 1970, which just so happens to be the cover date of Captain America 125.
It's almost like this is all planned.
Almost. So it's almost like one of us plans this out.
Hey, Rick, there was a comment today on Facebook.
Oh, shall we get to that comment? I think we should. So for those of you who are on our Facebook group, you really need to join it. It's Captain America Comic Book Fans. Just go on there. It's easy to join. Just agree to the rules, please. That'll make life easier for all of us. But whenever we have a podcast that drops, which is every Wednesday, I post in the group that the podcast is out. I give a little teaser what it's about. I give a link, and then listeners have the opportunity to go in there and share their thoughts. And that happens every time. Every time our listeners, sometimes it's a little, sometimes it's a lot, but they go in and they give their thoughts. So if you're not part of the group and you have thoughts you want to share with us, then please join the group and find those posts every Wednesday and share your thoughts. So one guy, Michael C. Johnson, who actually is a recent patron of the show. So shout out to Michael for being a patron of the show. We appreciate you supporting us. But yeah, this was for episode 89, which was part 2 of that top 10 other Captain America retcons that, Bob, you worked really hard on.
I did put a little effort into it. Yeah, that's true. Well, it's a labor of love, Rick, as you know, right?
Yeah.
You know more than anybody.
So Michael writes, and he tags Bob, and he says, I just heard this episode, should be completely caught up by end of workday tomorrow, and it was fantastic. You should head up episodes more often. Your enthusiasm and things you uncovered having actually done some research, and he put in parentheses and tags me. I think Rick will appreciate that comment. This was a very fun and informative episode. I especially enjoyed your uncovering of the details regarding the clearing up of Golden Age continuity. So That was kind of a backhand compliment, right? He's
Right,
talking,
yeah,
right?
right.
He loved the episode and
Yeah.
he wanted to give you some shout outs, but he also points out that the fact that, when you actually do some research.
Yeah.
I loved the comment because I'm like, yeah, let's get Bob to do more of this stuff.
No, thank you. I like being the color commentator. Folks, you have no idea how much work Rick does to bring these shows to you. And and I don't want to cramp his style. Take him out of his groove. I'm here for the color commentary, folks. I'm here for the enthusiasm.
I'm going to tell you right now, my feelings won't be hurt, Bob. No, but thanks, Michael. We appreciate that.
We do. Yeah, that was a great comment. And I loved it, by the way, Rick. I love doing the top 10 shows. And so I would encourage any listener out there, if you've got an idea for a top 10 show you'd like to hear, send it our way, because we're open to suggestions from the listeners. We want to give you what you want.
Yeah, because we did a top 10 villains not named Red Skull. That was way back in episode 9. We talked about doing a few others, right? We talked about doing a top 10 partners not named Bucky.
Right. Yeah.
We talked about maybe doing top 10 creators, top 10 other things. So yeah, we send us your ideas. Speaking of patrons, Bob, we have another patron who joined back on June 2nd. His name's Brian. I won't give out his last name, but Brian, I did reach out to you because we need to get your address so that we can mail you your What Would Cap Do challenge coin. So Brian, I messaged you on Facebook. You can check that out, or you could just send me an email to capcomicfans@gmail.com. So that's capcomicfans, plural, @gmail.com. And let me know your address and your last name. I don't want to give that out over the air, just so we can make sure it is you, and we will make sure to send that out to you after your third month. And for those who are wondering what the heck is Rick talking about, Bob, do you want to explain the challenge coin?
Yeah, I'd love to, Rick. It's a very limited edition of 100. That is 100 challenge coins were produced and ever will be produced. And they're only available to patrons of the Captain America Comic Book Fans podcast. So on one side, you got Cap Shield. On the other, you've got What Would Cap Do in big, bold letters. And then around the edges of the coin, you have 8 virtues of Captain America.
That's nice. So if you want more information on how you can become a patron and get the coin, just go to our website, CaptainAmericaComicBookFans.com. So Bob, how was your week?
My week was great, Rick, but I'm more interested in your week because rumor has it you had the old, hey, how you doing? The old Roto-Rooter. So how'd that come out?
Well, funny you should ask, Bob. Yes, so I took your advice because back, I don't know, April, May, when you had yours done, you had made the recommendation, for men of a certain age. And so I did. I signed up for it. I got it. It was this past Friday. Happy to report, clean bill of health. No issues. Everything's fine. Now, I got a question for you, Mr. Lucius.
Yeah.
Because when we had that weight challenge, right? You magically lost 5 pounds.
I did. Yeah.
I want to know what the hell you're eating because I only lost 2.5.
Well, I was a little bit curious about your prep routine as well. Because was it actually Miralax that you were taking?
Yes. But I don't want to, no, let's not get into it. But
because that's not what I was on.
It was a couple days of, prep. An all liquid diet, all that fun stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I only lost 2.5 pounds. So I thought you were like a vegan. Like, what the hell is in your colon
Who knows?
and your intestines that,
I think it's mostly water weight, Rick. I think, a lot of that stuff sucks water out of your body into your intestines.
True.
And so I think, the more water weight you're carrying, the more likely So
you're just saying you were more hydrated than I was.
I think I probably was. I'm carrying. I'm a little bit, girthy. So I think I have a little more. I carry a little more water around with me.
Apparently. Yeah. We'll go with that.
Yeah, but you sent me a picture of your pitcher.
I did.
Of prep.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's what I thought. I was like, my God, he's gone off the deep end. He's made himself a pitcher of Kool-Aid, and I bet there's vodka in there. I was like, that looks delicious. What's he complaining about?
Yeah. It was quite the elixir. So my body has like gone through extremes, right? So I had the wedding and the honeymoon and really overdid it during the honeymoon, right? I made that very clear, right?
Right.
The 7.5 pounds I lost between January 1st and June 1st, I gained every ounce of that back.
Yeah.
During the honeymoon. So that's an extreme. Then I go and I do the colonoscopy and I do, the flushing and all that. And now, Bob, I'm on this with my wife. We're doing this 5-day fast mimic diet. And I'm on end of day 2. So my body's going into ketosis as we speak. We'll see how much energy I have left to get us through this episode.
I know. I see the life ebbing out of you.
Thanks.
Fast mimic. Doesn't sound fast enough to me. 5 days. Damn.
I know. Trust me. I was like, I got plans this weekend. I'm like, I'm going to take it easy this weekend.
Yeah, you are.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get to today's issue. So, Bob, we already said it's Captain America 125, takes place in 1970. This story actually sends Captain America to Vietnam, which is, I believe, the first time that he's been sent to Vietnam or visits Vietnam. And it is in the middle of the Vietnam War. So maybe you could set the stage a little bit for the listeners of what was happening on the U.S., on the global front in 1970.
Wow, gosh, that's a lot. I do want to point out though, Rick, I think he'd been one time before, right? Didn't we cover a story in Tales of Suspense where he went on a rescue mission and it was the big heavy
general.
Right. The guy that looked like a sumo.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, yes. So lots going on in Vietnam at the time. Now, of course, we've been in Vietnam for 70. So a good 5-6 years, right? And this is, I think, did I tell you, I used to live in Vietnam, Rick?
Yes, you did. So I don't think the listeners know that.
Yeah, one of the reasons I was particularly interested in this story. So we had been, in Vietnam for quite some time, and we're right about at the pinnacle of American involvement in Vietnam. Nixon had, in January of that year, had come out and said that our course was irreversible. We were dead set on the South Vietnamese side prevailing against the North Vietnamese side. It had become entrenched. The Viet Cong, which were the, let's just say, the asymmetric guerrilla force affiliated with the North Vietnamese army, though not officially. They were everywhere. The North Vietnamese were, at this point, I think, being armed by both the Chinese and the Russians, and had built their supply line down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, increasing their presence throughout the middle and southern part of Vietnam. So it was, this was a tense time, right? We were locked in essentially a stalemate. Everybody knew this. And the war was very let's just say controversial back home domestically, right? Walter Cronkite would get on the TV every night and give the news about what was going on in Vietnam. And of course, soldiers were dying left and right, their bodies being returned home. And we didn't seem to be making much of a dent in pushing the South Vietnamese up past the parallel. So this is the context of the story, and folks had complained for the previous years in the Rap with Cap letters section about Cap not being involved in Vietnam. Some folks desperately wanted to see him involved in Vietnam. Other heroes had been involved in Vietnam. Of course, Iron Man, right? Tony Stark had been there, but Cap had not gone over to Vietnam, and people thought that was strange, right? He should be fighting for the American side in Vietnam. And so how is Marvel going to deal with this? That was the question of the day. Yeah.
And so here's this story, much to the pressure I think Marvel was feeling. So yeah, great recap on that. So we'll get into that. One of the things that we want to also keep in mind is as we're going through this issue, at the end, we're going to give our thoughts on what is our favorite panel. What do we feel is t-shirt worthy, right? So that could be a panel, that could be a page, a cover, a quote. And what do we want to put in the time capsule? What do we feel is going to capture this period of Captain America? So we'll talk about that as we go through. So the creative team for this, we've had as for quite some time on the book, we've had Stan Lee as the writer, of course. And then also we have as the penciler, Gene Colan. Now, Gene Colan had he's been on the book for a while. So at this point, he's still maybe 7 or 8 issues into his run. He ended up doing he was the artist issues 116 through 137. So it's a nice 22 issue run there. And then he came back and he did a few others. He did issue 256. There was an anniversary issue of 601. And then he also did annual 5. So he had a nice run back in this time period. But let's not forget, Bob, in 1950, he actually did Captain America Weird Tales number 75.
I did not know that, Rick.
Yeah. So he's been around. He knows Cap, and he has a style about him, right? Like it's a very moody style, I would say. He had long runs on Daredevil and some other, supernatural stories as well. So he's got a mood about him. So it's an interesting style.
That's a nice way to describe it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but that is exactly the vibe that I get.
Yeah. I mean, when he was, what else was he well known for? Tomb of Dracula. That's the one I was thinking of.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a very eerie type of thing. Mm-hmm. And he did some Howard the Duck too. So, he's a fantastic, iconic artist, and has in this issue an iconic inker with Joe Sinnott. So Joe Sinnott's been inks him in this issue, and letterer is Sam Rosen, and then Stan Lee is not only the writer but he's also the editor. Now on the cover has been done by Marie Severin. Now she has done a lot of Captain America covers, but this one, Bob, is an interesting cover, and for a couple of reasons. So you have a Captain America appearing to be unconscious or at least subdued, being carried into like a jail cell of a war camp. And you see these soldiers holding him on either arm as he's kind of limp. And it says, "Within the castle waits the captive," featuring the surprise villain of the year, and a starburst. The logo, the Captain America logo, has red, white, and blue, but it's weird. The colors are different, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
So it has white at the top, blue in the center, red at the bottom.
Yeah, it's not an ordering that we're familiar with.
Yeah, it is a little weird. You do have the Jack Kirby Cap logo in the corner, him holding up the shield, and 15 cents. 15 cents gets you this comic back then.
Good price.
Yeah. But the interesting part to me about this is this was not the original cover that Marie Severin did. Did you know that?
I didn't, Rick.
Yeah. So there is another cover that was originally done, and it is Cap on a hill in Vietnam in the jungle, and he's charging, and he's got Vietnam soldiers all around him, around his feet, jumping behind him with a dagger, or trying to hit him with the butt of a gun, jumping at him, firing at him, and he's just charging away. And the bottom of it says "Captured in Vietnam." But this cover was never published, and it was. Some people think it maybe, the editor, maybe it was, I guess at this point, Stan Lee decided, maybe just the cover wasn't as good looking,
Mm-hmm.
But it was probably more because Vietnam was so controversial, as you mentioned.
Right.
And so the cover they end up going with doesn't mention Vietnam at all.
Yeah. I think that was, it's interesting that you raise that because I do think there was likely a concerted effort to make it very indistinct. Like, so for example, in this, the cover that was printed, it's not very clear who is capturing Cap. And that becomes abundantly clear later in the story, who in fact captured Cap. And so I think, trying to stay away from the implication that it was, whether it was the North Vietnamese or the South Vietnamese, just sort of divorcing the cover entirely from that sort of speculation was a very, commercially and politically astute move by the editors.
Yeah. Similar to what they did with Black Panther, right? When they changed it and took the word black out and just said, Cap battling the, versus the Panther. Because Black Panthers were a militant group that were pretty controversial at the time. So
right, yeah,
yep. At the end of the day, they're trying to sell funny books, right? So they'll take that off the cover. One more interesting thing I gotta say about this cover, Bob. This cover, the unpublished cover, is actually owned by a member of our Facebook group.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, Harry, if you're listening.
Yeah, Harry, oh my gosh.
Harry owns a lot of Captain America art. And this is one of them. He owns the unpublished cover. Wow. It's really cool. He's shared it in the group before. And maybe after hearing this, he'll do it again. So that's really cool too. All right. And here's a solicitation they wrote for this book back in 1970. It had to happen. Our red, white, and blue Avenger finally battles in Vietnam, but not the way you expect. And watch for the surprise villain.
I've been looking forward all week to hearing you voice Steve Rogers' lines from the beginning of this book.
So on the splash page, the title to this one is
"Captured in Vietnam."
That's right. It's Captain America, living legend of World War II. And so here's Cap with his shirt off, throwing his top of his uniform and his mask in his apartment. And he looks angry. And he's got his shield in his hand, and he's kind of having a temper tantrum here. And he says, "I've got to get involved. I need some action, fast, anything to make me forget about Sharon." And so he's sitting there on his bed and he's moping, and he's basically talking about how ever since they broke up. He's been like in a trance. And I'm not going to go through this panel by panel, Bob. So you
come on. You owe it to the fans.
Really?
I want to hear this, Rick.
You want to hear this page?
Oh yeah, I want to hear this page, and then I want to hear this page and the next page.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We all do.
So he's sitting there on his bed, moping, and his shield's laying there, and he's just hunched over. Ever since we broke up, I've been like a man in a trance. The more I try to forget her, the more she's with me every hour, every minute. 1,000 times a day, I want to phone her, to rush to her side. But I mustn't. Not after she'd lied to me. Not when I know I could never trust her again. If I had a job or friends or any sort of social life, maybe I could take the loss. But the life I lead, the loneliness, gives me too much time to think, to remember. And there's a little image of Sharon in Cap's head. I want to stop here and just point out the style of Gene's art here. Like this second panel is really well done. It's coming from below, and he's got his hands clasped in front of his face. So you only see from his nose up, but the eyes are bereft with just, a sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And there's shadow as well. I don't know. When I saw that, I was like, wow, that's a master at work right there.
Yeah. In that imagining of Sharon in his mind, right? Mm-hmm. With her back to him, but her sort of coyly looking over her right shoulder, with her body ever so slightly turned, it's very well done.
Yeah, and it's a classic 60s pose too. When I see that,
right,
like I could just see like an advertisement or a movie poster with a woman in that pose. And I'll say this for Gene. I never really was a big fan of his work, but I am really impressed by his storytelling. He is a master storyteller. Next page. Wherever I look, I seem to see her. Even in the silence, I hear her voice, as though she's calling me. I've got to stop. Must snap out of it before I crack. It's time for the 6 o'clock news. Maybe that'll help me get my mind off Sharon. How can my own problems seem so big when the whole world's in such a mess? And then he's adjusting the rabbit ears on the TV as he turns on the black and white set. And like Bob pointed out before on the news, there's Walter Cronkite. It has just been learned that Dr. Robert Hoskins is missing in Vietnam. So he goes to the next page, and Dr. Hoskins, the peacemaker, it can't be. Wait a minute, Dr. Robert Hoskins? I loved him in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Right? Bob Hoskins?
Bob Hoskins, yeah, same guy.
Yeah,
get out of medicine.
Oh, okay. And so he goes on to explain that, this is just a peaceful doctor. He wants to help the sick, the wounded on both sides. And so he immediately was like, this is what I got to do. So he's putting on his clothes. And I love this fourth panel. Bob, have you ever seen a comic book that had someone putting on his trench coat in not in a neat way, but in a realistic human way, where he's putting it on,
shuffle it on,
and he's shrugging his shoulders and lifting his arms to get it over the rest of his clothes, because
he's in a rush,
right?
Yeah,
I love that panel.
I do. Yeah,
with his briefcase, he's all businessman like.
Yeah, right. I believe that's an attaché case.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So he decides he needs clearance from the State Department. And so he whips out his Avengers ID because he doesn't want to use his Shield ID because that would only remind him of Sharon. Hey Bob, do me a favor.
Yeah.
Don't think of a pink elephant.
Right.
Right?
Oh,
like
yeah,
if he keeps saying that's only going to remind me of Sharon, then his mind's going to keep thinking of Sharon.
Right.
Now, here's something interesting about that Avengers ID card, Bob. It's cut off, but it says this is to something, right? Can you read the card?
Well, it just says identification card. This is to cut off Steve, presumably Rogers, right? And then it says I think it says as a member probably in good standing, fully entitled, blah, blah, blah.
Right. Typical Avengers ID card.
Yeah.
But the interesting part to me is that it has his name on there. I thought like a year or two ago, like his secret identity was back and that Steve Rogers was supposed to be like a false identity and right. Didn't they do that in the pages of Captain America? Right. And yet he's going around with a card that has his name on it.
It's a good point. Maybe they don't associate Steve. Maybe they just think he's an Avengers, staffer.
Maybe. So he's there at the State Department and he explains his case and just says that he wants to go and try to rescue Dr. Hoskins. So they said, hey, sure, go for it. I mean, the odds are going to be against you, but we'll get you there. So then he gets on a B-52. It's a military plane there.
It's a very large military plane at that.
Yeah. And the pilot gets him on over there. He grabs a little nap on the way. Some interesting perspectives again from Gene here. A lot of angles up and angles down. He doesn't give too many straight on panels. So then we cut to Vietnam and we see there's propaganda going on and people are riling up the troops and it's saying we must avenge the loss of the saintly Dr. Hoskins. The enemy must pay for what he has done. And so everybody kind of gets riled up. And then the other camp says the same thing. And next thing you know, the battle continues to rage and it gets worse and worse. So as the battle ensues, right, both sides here are just, it says each side fighting with renewed vigor, renewed fanaticism, inflamed by a single symbol, the missing Dr. Hoskins. And then we get to see Cap. And it says, but suddenly, silently, a new colorfully garbed, battle-weary figure enters the fray. And he's kind of hiding in the jungle watching this. And he's no trace of Hoskins yet. Nothing but the senseless sound of battle and the endless toll of injury and death. Hoskins' fate has acted like a spark, igniting a spent and suffering land. But what if he should be alive? What if, by some miracle, I should find him? And then he starts getting shot at, and he's going for cover. And he sees there's a sniper in the tree, and he takes him out with his shield. And it's funny, he says, I hope I gave my shield enough of a boomerang twist. It won't be safe to go searching for it out there. And it does. It comes back to him. And so he's getting fired on, but he basically starts running through the jungle to try to escape. And he says, I came to find Dr. Hoskins, right? I'm not going to be here to fight a one-man war. But he is caught between the crossfire as he's running through the jungle, trying to escape. He does go into a trench. He kind of dives in there to try to. He says it's dark enough to conceal him, and he goes by, and the soldiers pass by. And Cap thinks to himself, "It was a mistake to wear my costume. It stands out like a beacon here, but it's too late to change that now. I still got a job to do." This is the area in which Dr. Hoskins was last seen. Somewhere, somehow, there must be a clue to his fate. And if there is, I've got to find it. So he climbs his way out of the trench. So he's just kind of going through, but it's interesting. He does point out that, he doesn't know the terrain. So that, that's an issue. But, Cap, being a man of honor and being brave, says, maybe if I knew what lie ahead, I'd be tempted to turn back, but I'm just going to keep going. So he sees a wire and he pretends to not see it. So that way, maybe it will flush out the enemy. And it does. And they come out and they attack him. But Bob, they don't look like the enemies that we just saw firing at each other.
No, you're right. They they do a great job. Ingrid does a great job here, right? Because I don't know if it was intentional, but although the uniforms, they look almost exactly alike, right down to the footwear. The colors are such that you can't really tell. Is this the Viet Cong? Is this the South Vietnamese regulars? You can maybe speculate, but there's no real clue there to clue you in on which side it actually is. Right.
Yeah. But even Cap notices that the uniforms are different. And so he says, they don't seem to belong to the North or the South Vietnamese. What does it mean? Who can they be? There's only one way to find out. No matter what the risk, no matter the consequence, I've got to let them capture me. And then Gene Colan has a nice close up on Cap's face, and he looks very, very determined. And so he lets them nail him in the back of the head with the butt of a rifle. And so they take him and carry him off to, quote unquote, the master.
I love this. I love this panel though, Rick, where they've sort of like, a guy up front has Cap's feet, his legs, another's behind him. He's got his shoulders, and they're carrying his slumped unconscious form. You see it in a silhouette, but he's still holding onto his shield.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like, when would they learn, Bob?
I know, right?
So they're going to a castle in the middle of the jungle. Bob, you've been to Vietnam. How many castles are there in the middle of the jungle? I haven't seen any, Rick, but I only went to something like 58 of the 64 provinces. So I might have missed some. Oh, okay. Only 58.
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah.
And then Bob, we see who the surprise villain that they talked about on the cover. And it's the Mandarin. Dun, dun, dun.
They did say it would be a surprise villain.
So interesting enough, Bob, this is, I'm looking at this is the 22nd appearance of the Mandarin, right?
He was frequently used back in the Silver Age, right?
He was in Tales of Suspense battling Iron Man probably like, a dozen times.
Right.
He did make an appearance in early Avengers. I think it was issue 20. He was in the first annual. He did make a couple of appearances in Incredible Hulk before this. So, but I think this is obviously the first time he was in the pages of the title Captain America.
Right.
And he says, "So, Captain America has fallen to the forces of the Mandarin. Can it be that the accursed Avengers, half a world away, are privy to my plan?" And then maybe can you describe the Mandarin's costume? I'm not going to say uniform because that's a costume.
So the Mandarin, right? The classic look of the Mandarin, he's got sort of a green cowl with a purple, almost looks like the original Hawkeye mask, right? It's got the points on it, right? He's got that going on. He's got a green cloak with purple trim with this really high collar, right? The collar comes up almost to his ears. So it's like a real Ming the Merciless look.
Totally.
Yeah. And of course, on his fingers, he has his sacred rings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he has 10 rings, right? He has
10 rings,
right, on the thumbs too, I believe.
Yeah.
And then he has the stereotypical long fingers with the long fingernails, That was a trope. I would like, basically of an Asian villain back then.
But it is rooted in history, Rick, because the Mandarins of China and Vietnam and that part of Asia didn't do manual labor. They were intellectuals. They were scholars. And so to grow their fingernails long was a demonstration that they did not have to work in the fields like, the laborers and the tradesmen. So it is rooted in history.
Interesting, Bob. I did not know that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, I also went to a high school with a guy who did not cut his fingernails, let them grow super long because he played the acoustic guitar and he thought it made him really cool. He didn't have to use a pick. I thought it was super creepy. But there comes a point. I think it comes a point, and it doesn't take very long. No, it doesn't.
For it to become creepy.
Yeah. 0 dates.
What, you didn't whip out the guitar
it's like I give you back massage after dinner.
Yikes. So they bring Captain America in front of the Mandarin, and he's like, oh, the Mandarin, then it was you who, quite correct, doomed one. 'Tis I who have captured your Dr. Hoskins. So it was him behind it the whole time, Bob.
Yes, so Mandarin-like.
And then he explains himself, just very much a villain-like, right? He has to get into some soliloquy on why, and he says, for I wish to have no peace in Asia until the East and West have destroyed each other. And then it is the Mandarin who will come forth to rule those who survive the Holocaust. And Cap stops playing possum and he says, that's what I had to know. And then he starts hitting people with, by the way, he has his shield still.
Still has it. Yeah. They think there would be some sort of, a website or something, best practices.
Right.
For dealing with heroes, right? Where people would just pass on.
Take their weapon away.
Yeah. Lessons learned sort of thing.
Yeah. So they start coming after him. And there's a really interesting panel here where a guy throws a spear and it goes through the top of Cap's swashbuckler boot and pins him to the ground. But Jean drew this in a way where it's Cap in his full body leaning forward, dodging the spear, but then it goes through his boot. And then Jean puts a break between the middle to create two panels. This one image is two panels to show the motion of what's happening here. So I think that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Point of contention, Rick. Are they swashbuckler boots or buccaneer boots? I'm always confused by the differentiation between the two.
That's a great question, Bob. And my answer is I don't care. You could call it whatever you want to call it.
I'm going on the Facebook site tonight, and I'm going to post that question.
You are. You totally are. I know you are.
Yeah.
And we'll have answers.
Yes,
we will have people, and they'll be, we have, it's totally a Buccaneers boot. Yeah. And I can see it now. Right? Like Jesse Simon will come on and talk about, his grandpa Joe, and probably show a picture of and it'll say like a little arrow, Buccaneer boot or whatever, whatever Joe wrote on that piece of paper. And then that will be the answer.
That hopefully this will settle it.
Yes. So he's getting attacked, and the next panel, Cap takes the spear that is stuck into the ground and his boot, and he pulls it back and hits the guy, and it makes a noise, Bob. And I think that's like the wrong sound that they should have put. I mean, like, I don't know what you hear in your head when I see a pole flip like that, but it's almost like a
that was perfect. Yeah.
Right? And then you expect to hear, like little birds chirping around the guy's head, as he's gotten hit. So he's again fighting off all the different ones coming at him, and then Mandarin's had enough. I had envisioned a more leisurely doom for you, but instead you force the Mandarin to use his mystic power rings. And Cap all of a sudden puts up his shield, and the rays are blocked, but they're pretty powerful. You can tell by the way this has been colored and inked. But Cap's like, he can't stand still. So he goes and he jumps on, I don't know, Bob, what is that? A drape?
It looks like, yeah, a curtain, a drape. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he's swinging up to a, oh yeah, it even says it. If I can swing up on this drape and hurl it open. Okay. And then he goes up there and gets behind, he cracks open some sort of window that has a grate on it, and he goes through it. And again, I love Gene's point of view. He makes some really good angles. But he gets there, and then coming up are flames. So he did it in just the nick of time. But his whole chamber, the Mandarin's chamber, is on fire now. And I love this panel, this next one, where the Mandarin is there and he's putting his hands up to cloak himself from the flames that are all around him. And he says, "By the shrine of my ancestors, he has escaped, but the Mandarin's wrath shall follow no matter where he flees." And he shakes his fist up into the ceiling where Cap fled to. So Cap's on this other level now, and he's walking down a corridor, and he sees a steel door, and he's like, well, what other purpose except to hold a prisoner? Have I found what I came for? And he asks, Dr. Hoskins, and the guy is like, well, who is this? And he's like, save your strength. Back away from the door. I have this barrel of gunpowder that I'm going to lay right in front of the door. What is this, Donkey Kong?
I know, right? Oh, just a barrel of gunpowder. That seems dangerous. From a risk mitigation,
Yeah.
Somebody should have been in facilities management and said, don't put this barrel of gunpowder just laying around.
So it blows the door, but the Mandarin made his way up there, and he says, "Fools, did you think escape would be so simple?" And he starts firing, but Cap gets in front of Dr. Hoskins and puts his shield up. And he says, now if I can tilt my shield at just the right angle to bounce those rays back towards the drawbridge chain. And I didn't know they're on a drawbridge, Bob. I thought they were somewhere else. But all of a sudden it's a drawbridge over a moat. And it snaps it. And what happens to the Mandarin?
He tumbles, man. He tumbles right off.
Yeah. Grab my neck, Doc, and hang on. We're not going to get a second chance. You did it. You leaped across the chasm. But what about the Mandarin? Even if he survives this plunge, his plan is crushed. Then, after an all-night trek, Dr. Hoskins is safe again, and Cap's job is finished. Now that both sides realize they were duped by the Mandarin, they can face each other at the peace table again. And then we cut to him back in his trench coat, and this time it's raining, and he's walking to that B-52. As for me, I have nothing to face but tomorrow, and all the tomorrows to come, with nothing but loneliness and strife, and the knowledge that one day, even Captain America must surely face defeat. The end. All right, Bob. I don't like the ending. What's up with that time period? Like, why does it always have to be like this melodramatic?
I know, right? Yeah.
It's like, hey, he just saved the day and everything's great. One panel later, one day I'm going to die.
And I miss Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, I know. We forget something. I mean, we talked about this in the top 10 other retcons, right? About Sharon, and like it was almost a blessing that Sharon was, temporarily sidelined. I was going to say killed off, temporarily sidelined for a bit, and allowing the writers to reset that character, because I mean, for just years, it was just this, right? I mean, just the tension between those two. I mean, like, get a room. So, I mean, it was just, and I don't know what it was the times, I guess, right? They're writing for a certain audience, a certain age group. And so things had to be very simple. And I think a lot of teenagers, let's face it, a lot of teenagers have that angst, right? They have that unrequited love, or that lost love, the most important love in their lives, right? That first love, second love, high school, whatever. And I think that sort of writing really resonated with an audience that's understood that pain. And maybe that's why the writers spent so much time with it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Stan Lee has been on record many times talking about how it was important that Marvel's characters had real life problems, right? It wasn't just these heroic adventures, and listen, they nailed it, right? I mean, that's why Marvel became so popular, with Peter Parker's problems and the X-Men's problems and so on. So, yeah, I mean, we look back at it now and it seems a bit, but it had an audience back then, and it created a huge demand for Marvel Comics.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Bob, I can't remember when we covered last episode, Captain America, Sentinel of Liberty #1, when we went through the panel, the t-shirt worthy and the time capsule, who went first?
I did.
Okay, so it's my turn to go first.
It is.
All right. All right. So panel, my favorite panel. It's going to be kind of a little kooky, Bob.
A kooky panel.
I'm going with page 4.
Okay.
And I'm going with the fourth panel, and that's the one where Steve's putting on the overcoat.
Yes, shrugging the shoulders into the coat. Right.
Like, I've never seen that in a comic. I don't think there's been one before, and there probably hasn't been one since, of a realistic version of a character shrugging on a trench coat. Because, when you have like a sport coat on and then you go to put the trench coat over top of that, it is hard. It's not like slipping on a coat. Yeah. So you have to like give that extra oomph. And it's just a really interesting choice by Gene
Colan.
By Gene Colan here.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That's my panel.
All right. That's a good panel. I'm going to go a couple pages prior to that, Rick. Page 2. I love that headshot of Steve with his hand on his chin, and he's looking off into the distance, and over his back you see that he's imagining Sharon. It's got Sharon in that very coquettish, looking over her shoulder, real pensive look. It's so
1970.
It's so soap opera-y, if that's a word. 1970s, young love romance comic. It's got that feel to it, and I love that panel.
Yeah, no, that's a great panel too. I like that. All right, good choice. All right, so for t-shirt worthy, now you go first.
All right.
What do you think is t-shirt worthy?
All right, I'm going to go page 10, Rick. That big panel at the top of the page with Cap with his shield up in front of him, running into a hail of gunfire.
Nice.
I like that. I think that would look great on a t-shirt.
Just that panel, or the whole shirt?
Just that panel. And in fact, I would say you could almost take out some of the background and just have Cap, with no background, with just that shield with the bullets coming his way. I think would make a great t-shirt.
All right. I had thought of that one. I did think of that one. I'm going to go with, I guess in the comics would be page 17. So I want to do 2 panels.
Ooh,
so I want to do the Mandarin putting his hands up, saying, "By the shrine of my ancestors, he has escaped." And then with the flames all around him. And then the next panel, he's got his fist and he's pumping it at the sky. And he's like, but the Mandarin's wrath shall follow no matter where he flees. I'm picking this. I know it's a little off the beaten path, but I'm picking this because I don't think the Mandarin gets on t-shirts too often.
That's true.
And to see him losing, right? And is kind of cool. I think the flames are cool. And I think the colors, the purple and the green and the yellow, I think would really pop on a t-shirt.
Yeah. All right. I like that. All right. So the last thing we have, I think, Rick, is our time capsule.
All right. I'm glad I'm going first here because I think I'm going to steal yours.
All right. Maybe not.
All right. I'm going with page 3.
Okay.
And I'm just saying this whole page 3, because you got Steve there on the black and white TV set putting up the rabbit ears. Right.
Yeah.
That is totally a time period. Like it pits this, and then Walter Cronkite. Right. You got Walter Cronkite talking to the evening news.
Yeah.
So that certainly is a time period that is, you look at that and you go, okay, I know I'm not in 1985.
Right.
I'm not in 1999. I'm not in 2010. This is totally a late 60s, early 70s thing. So I think that's going to go in the time capsule.
All right. That's a good one, Rick.
How about you?
I'm going to go with page 5. And right. I'm gonna go. We talked about this briefly. Do you remember when we covered? I can't remember what issue it was. What issue was it? It was when it was the Cap and Black Panther, right? And Sharon in her disguise as Irma Cruel. Do you remember that?
Oh yes.
And she was
put her
carrying
hair up and glasses on.
She had her little attaché case, right, with her radio and weapons and stuff. Mm-hmm. And Steve has an attaché case in the third panel of page 5, right? And he's got his thought bubble says that he's got his costume and mask inside. Now I don't know about you, Rick. I carry stuff to my office. I carry stuff to the classroom. Mm-hmm. I have a satchel. It's made out of a recycled tarpaulin. A truck tarp from like Brazil or something. I used to have a leather one, a wax leather one, very, fancy one, but I gave up leather and stuff and I gave that away years ago. So I have this tarp one, but there was a time that men carried attaché cases. And in fact, I still have my dad's.
No kidding. Because guess what? I have my dad's.
Do you really? Yeah, right.
Yeah,
that was big.
He called it a briefcase.
Right. Yeah. Right. But prior to, I think that was a more recent term. Prior to that, it was called an attaché case because it came from attachés, diplomatic attachés, more specifically, would carry official papers in the attaché case. And then it just sort of took off and became more popularized in the business world and became a briefcase. But so attaché case.
Because people carried their briefs.
Right. They carried their, apparently, Cap, Steve does here. Right. And so, but people don't really, I don't know if they carry those anymore like they used to. Back in the 70s, back in the Mad Men era, that was all the thing. And so when I look at this page and I see Steve, today, what would Steve carry his uniform and mask in? He'd probably carry it in a backpack, right?
Yeah.
If he wasn't wearing it underneath, right? But he'd carry it in a backpack or a sea bag, a duffel bag or something like that. But certainly not an attaché case that went along with his London fog trench coat.
Right. And my dad had a London fog trench coat,
which I
still have.
And I have mine. Right? So there's a time
hilarious.
Capsule moment, right?
Totally. I agree. I was using my dad's briefcase, I would say up until 2002.
Okay. Yeah.
I was working at an agency, and I'm pretty sure I was bringing the briefcase in every day.
Yep.
And have my stuff in there.
Yeah.
And he had his initials on.
Yeah. All right.
On the briefcase. So
nice.
It was probably like Samsonite or something.
Samsonite, absolutely. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's too much.
How cool is that? Yeah.
All right. Well, Bob, talk about some fun. Like I am so looking forward to next episode because we have for our guests to be on the show. Next episode, which is going to be episode 95, and it'll come out the first Wednesday in August. Because we try to do the first Wednesday every month. We try to have guests, and we've been pretty successful up to this point. We have John Sewell, Seth Talley, and Doug Hogan. Now, for those of you, you might say, John Sewell, why is that name familiar? Well, he's been on the show a few times. He has done the voice of, he's called in as the Red Skull. He's called in as Batroc.
Slays me every time.
Yeah. And all three of these guys have done some work in the industry, whether writing or whether drawing. They've all worked on some independent comics. So we can certainly talk to them about that. But that's not why I'm looking forward to them, because these three guys are very good friends of mine. Back when I had my comic book store in Atlanta, John and Doug were two of my best customers, and Seth was, I could say it now, it's been a while, my favorite employee. Okay. And we've become friends during when I had the store, and then after, obviously. So they're going to come on and they're going to talk about their love for Captain America, but also they'll probably have a few embarrassing stories about me at the time when I had my store. Yeah.
I can't wait for this episode. I can't wait to have a conversation with those. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So make sure you come back next week for episode 95. All right, Bob. Hey, as always, it's been fun wrapping cap with you.
Let's do it again. How about next week, Rick?
Sounds good, Bob.
All right.
All right. He's Bob Lucius. I'm Rick Verbanis, and you've been listening to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.